Okay, I'm gonna talk about how and why basically anything to do with the government is almost always less efficient than if it's done in the private sector. A big reason is because there's not a lot of competition in the government, and there's a basically a never-ending ability to just tax and have more money or simply print it, right? The government can work with the central banks and be allocated money that other companies simply cannot do, right? Um, you look at like the United States Postal Service, they have lost billions of dollars, I think, for multiple years now, but it's a government ran operation, right? Other companies cannot, if they were to operate for years on end with a loss or losing millions or billions of dollars, they would, you're out of business, you're done. And the same thing goes for the employees. If you're working in a private sector job that's competitive and you need to produce stuff or you need to produce results, you're not going to stick around long if you're not producing. They are going to evaluate you based on your production and what you're adding to the company or what you're adding to the job. And if you're costing more than what your value is, they will make the easy decision to just move on from you. Um, some bigger companies, it's like a bureaucracy, and certainly the government is a big bureaucracy where once you get in, you can kind of you're not necessarily held to a standard, and you can kind of do whatever you want in some aspects because I think it's much more difficult to fire or to get rid of someone in the government than it would be in a traditional job, right? I mean, I've been at jobs or I've heard about people in jobs where literally if you're not producing or you're not hitting a quota or whatever you're supposed to do, you're going to be fired very, very, very quickly, right? And you could be working really hard, you might not be able to do the job and they're going to move on from you. The government, whatever you're doing there, once you get in, you might end up staying there for a long period of time because no one's necessarily supervising you to ensure that you're hitting all the metrics or whatever you need to be hitting, because there's no real metric with the government. Everything is, it's like spending people's money that isn't your money. You're going to be a lot more quick to spend other people's money than you would your own money. A great example is, when you're a kid, you don't have any context for what money is, or that you actually have to give up your time to earn money in many cases, or in all cases. Some people just have a bunch of money, but for most people, you're going to have to make a trade-off between working or doing some task or giving your labor in exchange for money. When you're a kid, you don't have to, you just want to do everything and you don't understand money. So it's not necessarily the kid's fault. It's just the kid doesn't understand that in order to do all these things and travel and maybe go to like a theme park and buy a new bicycle or get new clothes or get like a new PlayStation or an Xbox or whatever, you have to have the resources to do that. It doesn't just come to existence, right? So you need to give some of your labor, or you have to learn a skill and trade your time for that money to go get that product. Kids don't understand that, and so they just want to have fun all the time. That's just natural. But so that's kind of what the government is. It's like no one really is holding them accountable. They have money that they can kind of conjure into existence. They're not really evaluated based on how productive they are. I think there was a stat that said basically for like every $2 or $3 spent on government spending, it is producing $1 in like benefit. So it would be like investing $3 and getting back $1. You'd be better off just not investing the money. You'd be better off doing nothing and holding on to your $3 because you're getting 33% back of your initial investment. So now some of that stuff's necessary, right? Because there's, you can argue the post office, people want to have mail and cheap mail and They got to deliver to the PO boxes, and everyone needs to get their mail, and the roads need to be taken care of, and public services, and some of the basic health services. Although we don't have universal health care, so a lot of people, the insurance industry is a big. I actually almost think that a lot of that should be done through the government because it's so inefficient going through the private companies, right? It's very expensive. And that might have been a reason why there was all that unrest around the guy that just got murdered, obviously just in the middle of the street, right? A lot of people are not happy with that industry. That doesn't justify that guy doing that, obviously, but tensions are high because there's so much corruption, and it does, it happens in the private sector too, right? There's a lot of people that, whether you're in government or whether you're, high up in a company, everyone has their own self-interest, their own, conceited, narcissistic, self-centered, their own interest. They're going to put their own interest first. If they think they can get ahead financially by doing something or not doing something or giving a job to a certain contractor and they're going to get some money for it, or allocating resources because they're in control of like a government fund and putting it into a certain company. People do that because they're looking at their own interests. It's the same as, everyone does that. That's why you decide to work somewhere, or you're looking into changing your job, or you're looking into how you can make more money, because you're always concerned about your own personal outcome. And I think you have a lot of that in the government, because people realize they're in a position of power, and you have all these people that make $150,000, $180,000 a year that are like multi-millionaires because they're getting involved with lobbyists. They're supporting, certain laws and regulations that benefit a certain company. And so maybe after they are done or during their term, they're getting some amount of money or stock or kickbacks or bonuses, and then they get promised a position or some amount of equity in these companies. And so they're basically just being bought. And that's human nature. People are corruptible. I often say too, it's like, hey, if I was in that position and people were offering me things that wasn't necessarily illegal, or maybe it was illegal, I don't know. But if you're being offered all this money to do things that kind of a gray area, maybe it's not illegal, I think a lot of people would do that because they're concerned about their own situation. And they say, well, shit, why am I going to pass up an opportunity where I could become a multimillionaire? I can provide a much better life for my family, and all I have to do is give this government contract to this one supplier or whatever, right? A lot of that happens. I think these people get approached and the government gets taken advantage of. They get exploited because you have all these people that represent the government, but they really only represent themselves. They're most concerned about how they're going to get compensated and how their own outcome is going to be. They're not really concerned about saving money for the U.S. government or being efficient, because they don't get anything for that. They only get paid if they give the contract to this person. They don't get paid for doing an actual analysis and saving the U.S. government money. So everyone has their own self-interest, but it's very bad in the government because a private company would have to make sure that they're spending their money wisely, or else they'd be out. But a government or government body, or if you have been elected to represent the government, you could do things without really having a lot of checks and balances, because you don't have shareholders really. You just have a big pot of money that you can kind of do whatever you want with it. And there's a lot of corruption there, But again, private companies, if they start messing around and hemorrhaging money and, signing contracts that are terrible, that are not productive, that they're just losing a lot of money on, the company would lose funding. It would be bankrupt, and it would cease to exist. But that doesn't happen in the government. So a lot of these people that get in with the government, it's just like an old what do they say? An old guys club, an old men club, because they can do things that aren't necessarily good for the country, but it personally enriches their own situation. And a lot of that happens. A lot of that is around the, like, wars, all of the military equipment and all the stuff that goes into funding the military. A lot of those contracts are awarded to, these suppliers that they give away very lucrative contracts to. That was what that movie War Dogs was about, right? Those guys were sourcing all this military equipment and then charging the U.S. government, millions and millions of dollars more than what their cost was, because they saw it as a way to make money. And so that's just the problem with the government, is that there's really no one's really overseeing what's going on. As a consumer, you have to monitor how much money you're spending. You have to budget everything, and you have to know where your money's going. But as a government, you're just one person maybe acting within the government, and you're not really held, it's not your money. So you're going to be much more willing to spend the money and enrich your own self, because it's, at the end of the day, it's not your money. No one's going to come back to you and say, hey, we need that money back, or what did you do with the money? So they make decisions that are going to personally enrich themselves. And that's really the problem with government. You can't do that in the private sector for an extended period of time. You look at, I think the company was Chrysler or Stellantis. They've been doing terrible, right? And their cars aren't selling. They're way overpriced. So the CEO is gone. They're paying their CEO way too much. The cars aren't selling, right? So, the company is probably going to be in rough shape because they're not making a product that people want. But the government can continue to do things, offer subsidies on these electric vehicles. They can offer programs that have no return on them, and they'll just keep doing it because someone approved it and someone signed off on it, and it's not a good use of money, but no one's really accountable, so they end up doing it. So anyways, I'm ranting on it, but you guys let me know what you think. You can subscribe. See you on the next one. Take care.